All right, the record button's on.
Got it.
All right, awesome, cool. Kia ora, everybody. Thanks for listening to podcast number 35. I think I'm losing track because we're doing so awesome. Yeah, thanks for listening in and welcome back, Tane.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what have you pulled up in your box of knowledge since we last spoke, I guess?
I think what I've taken away is just taking time to actually reflect on everything. You know, like sometimes you actually have to hear that you should reflect on things to actually sit down and find time to reflect on things. I think during the last 2 weeks with all the assignments building up during right before mid-semester break, it's been go, 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 and I haven't actually had a chance to just sit down, have a couple of hours to myself and just reflect on what I'm doing and where it is I want to take this semester. I think it's been so caught off guard with trying to just go with the flow, get everything going and get everything like the ball moving. And now it's about reflecting on what I've done so far and where I actually want to take this semester going forward.
And it's pretty hard to do that because, I mean, you've had a pretty crazy start to the year, you know. Nobody could have prepared you for COVID. Nobody could have prepared you for, or, you know, nobody prepares you for what actually subordinate life is like, and then throw in the whole COVID situation. So it's been go, go, go. And I guess it's a good time for you to reflect back and, well, actually find time to reflect because that's the key thing, right? And I think that's an important learning there. And I guess that leads on to my learning from the last time we spoke is that it's okay not to know. You know, sometimes we just get into this whole world that you have to know everything. You have to know what you want to do. But there are experts out there that you can call on to help you do stuff. And I reflect that because of the stuff that I'm trying to do with my coaching business. I'm trying to do everything, but somebody reached out to me and said, hey, you know, you don't have to do everything. I know how to do this here. Why don't you just speak to me? I was like, oh, okay, cool. So it's a bit of an ego. You've got to drop your ego and go, right, cool, I don't know everything. And I'm just going to ask people that actually know. So it's okay. And there's experts out there. I mean, I wouldn't pretend to be a doctor, so I go to a doctor, right? So why don't I do that with other things in my life? So yes, that was my big learning, I guess, reflection. And that leads on to our guests. As always, we try to bring you some people that we think are pretty awesome. In fact, we don't try, we do. We brought 35 other people that we think are amazing. And there's no difference here. Our guest today, well, we'll find out who she is as we go through the conversation, and we'll introduce her. Welcome to the podcast, Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Hannah, the way we start the podcast is if you just let us know a bit about who you are, and then we'll get into how you got to where you are and your passions, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start off with the basic info.
Yeah.
I'm Hannah. I whakapapa from Invercargill. I grew up in Invercargill. I'm 24. I went to Otago Uni, and one of my kind of leading things and how I live my life is connecting with people and helping them, or trying to help them live the best life that they can whilst also doing that for myself.
Awesome. And that's a great wee humble intro to who you are, and that's a great start. So you mentioned that you finished up at Otago University, and you from Invercargill originally. Can I just take you back to, if you can remember this? I mean, when you were at school and you're finishing up at school, was university always in your horizons, or was it something that was introduced to you as you were growing up?
I suppose a bit of both. I've always liked using my mind quite a lot, but actually the kind of key driver for me to go to university was, and I've had that for a long time. I had that while I was growing up. Was knowing that I was going to come to uni. Was because my mum used to be a tour guide for Top Deck, and she traveled for 15 years and then created a life for us when I was born, and she was almost 40. And the only reason she could do that was because she had a university degree that she could fall back on. And so that's actually why that was my primary driver to come to uni, was so I could have something later on in life that was going to, you know, help me create a stable and supportive lifestyle for whatever family that I fell into or created.
What an inspiration right there, because, you know, I like the way you've mentioned that it's not about the direct go to university, find a career. It was more about, hey, this is something that in my future, if something happens, at least I have something in I guess in my back pocket, if you want to call it that way. And I think that's important because a lot of people think they need to go to university and then get a job straight away, and living that tick box lifestyle. So it's awesome that your inspiration came a bit of a different way. I mean, imagine going on top deck for 15 years. That'd be great. You meet some amazing people.
I know. She really lived the life, I tell you what.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And then, so for those of you that are not from New Zealand, Invercargill is at the bottom of New Zealand, right at the bottom there. So you had to leave home to go to university because there's no university where you are. And was that a challenge for you with your family, with being close to your family, or were you like, cool, off I go? And why did you choose the university that you chose, I guess?
Well, it's just me and mum. I grew up just in a single parent household, and mum and I are really close, but mum has taught me about she's met so many people over her time that have changed her perspective in so many ways. And Invercargill is quite a siloed community, so it's a very, it's very white. It has a very strict mentality as to how life kind of goes. And so I think it actually wasn't a hard decision for me to decide to leave Invercargill, because I knew that mum and I would always come back together. There's nothing necessarily keeping her in Invercargill. I knew that I still know that we're going to end up in the same place when I start to settle down, and Dunedin's only just up the road. But I was actually set on going up to Wellington because I didn't want to. I've always had this thing, I don't ever want to buy into what everyone else is doing. I want to do something different. And all of my friends were coming to Dunedin because Dunedin is just so easy for Invercargill. And I was set on going to Wellington, but I actually went up to Wellington and I came to Dunedin because mum was like, you should have a look anyway. And knowing that I was going to do the degree that I was going into, which was law, I knew that I was going to need as much academic support as possible. And actually Wellington didn't have what I needed. I was being realistic with myself, and I'm glad that I did, because law wasn't exactly the easiest thing for me to do. It doesn't really click in my mind as well as it does for others. So Dunedin then became a really good opportunity for me to tap into all of these other kind of things. Realistically, you're going to meet a whole range of different people regardless of where you go for uni. So it was a hard decision to make, actually, letting go of Wellington, but it was the right decision for me.
Yeah, and I guess, and that's important because the realization right there, because you have your heart set on something, and the realization go, actually, it's again, like I said before, the whole ego thing. You've got to go, okay, cool, I need to go where it's right for me. And Tana, you had the same thing as well, because you have to leave Taranaki to go away. And I know we've spoken about this many times, that you came to Otago with the hands-on experience, but you also had options to choose.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard choice to make, and especially when you do have other people going other places. You don't want to leave that comfort level that you have at being home or being with your friends who you've spent your a majority of your life with, to then be like, oh, actually I'm going to go somewhere. And it was really difficult for me, especially tossing up between Auckland and Otago, because most of my close friends were going to Auckland, but I just knew that deep down I wanted to move further away than going to Auckland, and I knew that there was something here that I just knew that I would grow more being here than going to where my friends were.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because you chose to go where your friends weren't going, and Hannah ended up going to a place where a lot of her friends are going. It's pretty crazy, but that doesn't define anything, because like you said, Hannah, when you go to university, wherever you go, you meet lots of other people, and your friends from school, they might stay your friends, but you meet other people that become your family, I guess, in another way. So you arrive at Otago, Hannah, and what is that experience for you like? What is the university experience like for you as a student?
I had a really rocky road, actually. I think overall, on reflection, my experience was amazing. I met some absolutely life-changing people that really have changed the direction of who I could have become, who I am now. But there were definitely some really, really deep lows and some really challenging times. I think just still trying to navigate and find out who I was, and going down one path and realizing actually that's not who I want to be, and then having to kind of backtrack and go another way, or just shift. And when you put in a lot of energy for one thing and it doesn't turn out, it doesn't serve you, then it was hard to reckon with that. But overall my time at Otago, and actually because it was so long, I was there for 5 years as a student, really allowed me to develop a really wonderful experience.
Awesome. And
I needed the time for it.
totally. And I think you mentioned something that's really important there, that you have the deepest lows and the highest highs when you go to university. If you are comfortable sharing, can you remember one of the deepest, the first lows that you felt that caught you unexpectedly when you were at university?
I think actually it was in my second year, and there were two in my second year, but one of them academically was me in second year law realizing that actually I didn't want to be a lawyer, and that I had committed to a degree that wasn't what I wanted to do as a career. And I had been so sure that being a lawyer was something that I wanted. And so just that ultimate feeling of like being lost, and then that daunting feeling of going, oh my gosh, I've got another, how many years of this? 3.5 years.
Yeah.
That was a terrible feeling.
Yeah. And how did you navigate that there? Because you could have at that point gone, because at Otago, second year law, you were like, I'm done. I'm just gonna drop.
Yeah.
Well, not drop, just not withdraw from that. How did you navigate that? Because that would have been an option for you.
Yeah, it was, and I had the same feeling again the next year. And actually, in my third year, I had the withdrawal papers ready to sign with the dean. But my mum was a really good source of reason, I guess, and so I was in really good dialogue with her and what that kind of meant for me. And I suppose it was a change in understanding of what my degree was actually going to do for me. So I kind of had to leave that idea that I was going to be a lawyer and actually think about how I can translate my education, I suppose, and the skills that I learned within my law degree into something different and create something new that was going to serve me. So the way that I got around it actually was just completely flipping it on its head and saying, actually, use this not to be a lawyer, use it to do everything else with the skills that come with a lawyer, because that means I've got a whole extra skill set going into something that a lot of other people won't have. And a lot of other spaces don't necessarily have that critical thought process, or haven't had that trained critical thought process. So it was a lot of talking to my mum, and a lot of crying, and a lot of having to like fight that mindset change.
Yeah, and I think thank you for sharing that, because I think the key thing there is, number one, you had a support structure that you could talk to and trust. And also the second thing is the reframing. I think reframing is so important in so many spaces, and not many of us do that. And I'm going to say that because at the start you said that you like to go against the grain for in a positive way. This is you want to make the world a better place. And I think the minute you saw how you could use law to do that, that would have just changed the way you saw things, which is what you mentioned. Which is what's seen you grow, I guess. But you also mentioned that you had a couple of lows there, and I'm going to come to something that I know you're very, very, very strong and passionate about is mental health and well-being. How did you get into that space there? Was that something that you, because you went through the journey, you thought, okay, cool, I need to become an advocate for it, or was that somebody that tapped you on the shoulder that said, hey, we're here, do you want to join us?
Actually, definitely what I had experienced. I had experienced the highs and lows, but I haven't ever been diagnosed with depression or anxiety or any mental illness. But what was my kind of turning point was in my second year. One of our really good friends from my college, it hasn't gone through to the coroner yet, but it was a suspected suicide. So it's suspected that she took her life. And that was a turning point for me, because she did everything that society asked her to do. So, she spoke out, she was seeking help, she was seeing a psychiatrist, and then still she couldn't see the light. And that really just, like, obviously emotions outpoured with that, and our friend group was really rocked. But I realized that there's so much that just isn't being done, and that was a turning point for me. And all of the governmental systems that need to change wasn't happening fast enough. And I decided, well, if they're not doing it, then I'm going to do something about it myself, because I can't wait to watch other people do that, or to let other people do that. I'm going to try and do as best I can to support them in whatever way that is, and particularly around supporting the supporters, because a lot of my friends really struggled with our friend's death, and that there was just no support for them,
Yeah.
and no support for us, and that is just so wrong in my mind.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it started, actually, was realizing that there's just this huge hole, and that hole needed to be filled somehow, and I wasn't going to fill the whole hole, but I was going to start.
Yeah. And it's really crazy, and it's really quite sad that in humanity, for humans, something bad has got to happen for good to start happening. This is just it's a trend. We see that all the time.
Yeah.
And I like what you said. You can't fill the big hole, but you can start filling it in. And it goes back to a quote that I always use about the starfishes. Have you heard about the starfish quote?
No.
So the starfish quote is so there's this young boy, and he's on a beach, and there's thousands and thousands of starfish that are just on the stuff on there, and he's picking them up and throwing in the water. And this guy walks by, and he goes to the young man, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm trying to save the starfish." And the guy goes, "There's so many out there. You're not going to save these." And then he picked up one, and he threw in the water, and he said, "But I've saved that one there." And to me, that is a powerful story, that as whatever change you make, when you're impacting one person, or you're filling your hole, whatever hole you're filling, it's not about volume, it's about small impact. So yeah, I really resonate with that. I also resonate with what you say about the carers, and this is in any situation, when someone is unwell, the people that are unwell will have the support structures for them, but the people around them, it's really hard. And I'm going to share a personal anecdote, because this happened. My mom got diagnosed with cancer a few years ago. And yes, you said about your mom getting cancer, but I was more of my dad, because he was alone. I know my mom had to go through her things, but who's going to look after my dad? Who's going to care for the carers? And I think, like you said before, there's no support, there's no outwardly support structures there. So I really resonate, and I really am thankful for the work that you do in that space there, because it is important across the board. So yeah. So when you have this, what is your step? So you have an idea. Everyone has an idea, but ideas are just ideas until things start happening. What did you do with that idea?
Well, I'll backtrack a little bit, actually. So
Sure.
At the end of my first year, I went through a breakup with my long-term boyfriend, and I was super sad, and it was my first summer out of uni, and it was a hard time for Hannah at that stage. And my mum, knowing that I'm a real Disney fan, I really like Disney. I think it just makes me happy. She took me to Moana. So Moana had just come out in the movies, and so she took me to that. And having been a competitive swimmer when I was younger, and done a little bit of ocean water swimming, Moana actually inspired me to get back into the ocean and start doing a bit of water work there. And so I had been getting into swimming a lot, actually, over that second year. And I realized that when our friend died, that something needed to happen, and I needed to do something that showed how committed I was to helping with this change, but also showing what is important to me to keep my emotional health and my mental health, grounded and maintained. And so I decided that I was going to do a large open water swim and fundraise money because I didn't have the answers, like I'm not a professional in this area, but it was something that I was wanting to understand more and support and be a part of. So I created an awareness campaign that was going to, I hoped was going to reach people around me, particularly in my communities, so in Otago and Southland, because, there's a lot of, swept under the mat issues around there. And so I decided that I was going to do one of the something really extreme, so people understood how serious I was about it, because, I could swim the length of the Otago Harbour, but no one's really going to care about that, are they? And, people row that all the time. I wanted to do something that was going to grab people's attention not for what I was, not for me, but for what it meant, what I was doing.
Yeah.
To bring awareness to the fact that this is just such a gaping hole in our system, our structure, and society. So yeah, I decided to do a big ocean swim and fundraise some money.
Yeah, so for our listeners out there, do you want to tell us what that big ocean swim was? I mean, you're just saying big ocean, but let's tell them exactly what it was.
Sure. So
well, I can tell you actually, because I can see Hannah's like, oh, I don't know. So do you want to show it, or do you want to do it?
You can go for it. Every time I have to say it, I struggle.
All right, cool. So so for those of us that don't live, okay, so New Zealand has three islands, two main islands, the north and the south, and we have an island called Stewart Island at the bottom. And there's a body of water that separates the South Island from Stewart Island, and it's a treacherous bit of water called the Foveaux Strait. I don't know how long it is, but that was what Hannah decided to swim. You know, it is. I've been on that strait a few times, and every time I go on that strait there, I think I just keep praying to say that because the waves are just so crazy. So Hannah, you decided to choose that. Why did you decide to choose the Foveaux Strait?
So when I was planning it, there had only been 9 people that had ever swum Foveaux Strait. So, you know, it's not something that open water swimmers go into regularly. Whereas, you know, Cook Strait, which is in between the North and the South Island, 15 people do it a year. It's really commercialized. You know, Foveaux Strait comes with a lot of risk and a lot of planning and a lot of commitment. And I think I wanted to demonstrate that I was committed and that it was something I'm serious about, and it wasn't something I was just doing lightly. Not everyone can get in there and do that. It requires commitment and dedication, and it requires a lot of time to be able to build up your swimming stamina and build up your open water swimming. So I decided to do that. Also, completely unrelated to all of that, it was really close to Invercargill, which is where my mum lives now. So it was easy for me to go home and have a shower afterwards.
Let's be practical, right? It's about being practical.
Yeah, it wouldn't have cost. It would have cost me a lot more to go up to the Cook Strait or to Lake Taupo. It's a lot easier to be down in Foveaux Strait and just drive 45 minutes home.
Exactly. I mean, let's be practical. I mean, that's amazing. According to Google tells me that it's 28 kilometers. Yeah, which is pretty massive. How did you?
Straight line.
Yeah, in a straight line. And how did you mentally prepare for that? I mean, the physical preparation is, you've got to go through the motions, but what is the mental preparation like for you?
That was probably the hardest thing. I think physically I was really capable. I probably could have done it, tried to turn back and go again. You know, I had done a lot of physical preparation for it. Mentally, it was a lot trickier because at the time when I was training, I was still at uni. I had 5 papers. I was working as well, and I was training full time. So it was a very tiring time. But regardless of how tired I was or how little sleep I got or how emotionally taxed I was because of the work that I was doing, my why was always kind of the thing that kept driving me. And particularly that was the thing when I was actually doing the swim was my biggest motivator, and the thing that got me across was why I was doing it. And that was to help, our society and my communities build and maintain better emotional and mental health. Try to anyway, create preventative measures rather than reactive measures to ensure that everyone's safe and everyone's thriving.
Yeah, because I'm sure, 28 kilometers is no mean feat, and it would have been times when you were like, what am I doing here? And I guess your why was stronger than the what am I doing here? And for our listeners out there, it's pretty cold as well. It's at the bottom of the South Island, which is basically Antarctica waters come straight through. So and you managed to do that in 8 hours and 40 odd minutes. Is that correct? Was that?
Yeah, so I didn't swim in a straight line, unfortunately. If only I had. So it was a little bit longer than 28k, but yeah, it was 8 hours 46.
Yeah, awesome. And when you left the waters, what did you feel? Did you feel a sense of what is your feeling?
I was pretty stoked.
Yeah.
I think I ran onto the beach and I started dancing, which a lot of people were like, "How did you do that?" But I think it was that full adrenaline moment and just acknowledging the fact that it was something that I could do, and I was making a difference. Regardless of what I thought the difference was. It's always hard when you're doing something like that to actually know the magnitude of what you're doing. But as you said with the starfish analogy, if you can help one person, then you've done everything that you really set out to do. And I knew that I had.
You definitely had. You definitely have, and I think that was a springboard to what happens next in your life as well. And what is the reaction from the community to that?
It was pretty extraordinary, actually. I think the reaction was more than any money that I could have fundraised. Particularly in Southland, a place that's really quite closed off, and there's not much talk of mental health at all.
Yeah.
I was suddenly being invited to talk at primary schools and high schools and Rotary groups and businesses and athlete groups to talk about what emotional and mental health means to me, and what it's meant to my friend group, and what we could do as a community or as communities to help improve each other and help support each other. And that kind of reaction is it just blew me away, because that's not something that I ever thought was possible, particularly in Southland. And here in Otago, particularly Dunedin, it was incredible as well, because people stopped and had to think about it, whether or not they acted, at least they thought.
Yeah, which is what you're trying to do, right? That was your intention, was to get people to think about it, which is pretty amazing. And I guess that's changed your life a little bit as well. Once you started being invited to these places to talk about it, I guess you now started seeing the real impact of mental health and emotional well-being that's in the community, not just in individuals. And how did that then change the trajectory with what you were doing? Or did it actually change it or not really?
It definitely did.
Yeah.
It definitely did. I suppose one of the most pivotal moments was when I was invited to speak at the opening of the Social Impact Studio at Otago. So my friend Maddie, who I had met earlier on that summer before my swim, invited me to speak at this opening. And then I met Sian, who's the manager there. And really that kickstarted a complete change in how I thought about things. And so I then joined the Silverline team midway through the year. And Silverline is the university's student-led mental health and wellbeing initiative. And while Silverline was a huge, huge, huge part of what shaped me in my last years at uni, it was actually the people that I came to meet. I think that was where I met my people, and that was where my experience at university really changed, and where I found purpose and I found meaning in what I was doing, because previously I had largely been doing it on my own, whereas now there were people around me who had the same motivation and commitment to social change, whether it be for mental health or whether it be for environmental impact. It absolutely changed my course, and I have met and created connections elsewhere and followed those paths that I wouldn't have done had I just gone to law school and studied and done nothing else.
It's really interesting. Every single one of our guests that we've had on has said the same thing. Something has happened in their lives that has taken them on a different pathway, where they've now met people or communities that resonate with their values. And I think a lot of us, myself included, we forget about our values, and we look at the superficial things that the world has. And when you find your value-driven people, your world just changes, because you actually are resonating on the same frequency, I guess. So it's awesome that you found that. But it's not that you found that, you also created this amazing community of people that I look back and I go, when I was at university all those years ago in South Africa, or when I was in Dunedin as well, that didn't exist. But that didn't mean there was no mental health or emotional well-being, and the fact that it's student-led is really important, because it is out there in the open. People can talk about it, which is what our last a few months ago, Albert also spoke about as well. Just change the whole vibrancy of acceptance. No, acceptance is the wrong word. That it is out there, because I don't think we should accept it. I think we need to change it, right? Yeah. And what are some of the highlights for you in that, when you found this tribe of people, or this vibe of people?
I suppose primarily, actually, I was forced to question what I understood as reality, because, again, I grew up in a really isolated community, and I thought well, I didn't think I knew that there was other things out there, but I wasn't forced to really face that and face my privilege and face what all of these things meant for me, and particularly around the mental health and emotional health sphere. It's not all the same, obviously. Everyone has different experiences, but if you extrapolate that a bit more, different cultures, for example, Albie, his experience with mental health and his cultural background and the influences on that are so different to mine. Doesn't mean that either of our experiences are less valid, but it's something that without that community and without those people that I met, I would never have considered. And I think that's probably the most challenging learning, but also the best gift I could have got by being in that space and meeting those people, was understanding that although all my intentions have been in the right place for these kind of things, you're continually learning, and you continually have to question what you're doing. And I couldn't have asked for anything more life-changing than that, because I now take that into everything that I do.
It totally, and that goes back to one of the first things you said, which was when you go to university, your perspectives gets challenged, and this is what happens, right? There's three of us in this conversation, and all three of us will have a different perspective of mental health and well-being. But the way the narrative sometimes goes, is only one way to look at it. But we know that your perspective and my perspective and Tanya's perspective are all the same if you extrapolate that out, and that's an important thing. And Tanya, I guess you as a sub-warden, you would be. This is me just suggestive. I mean, you probably see the mental health and emotional health in your young students come to the fore. And is it? I know this is now speculative, I guess. Do you think this is the young people are speaking about it more openly, or do you think it's or is it still something that's a bit of a taboo topic?
I think it's still something that's challenging for our students. I think, especially because they don't know anybody here, they come and they might have one or two close friends, but they only know each other on a superficial level. But in saying that, they are confident and comfortable to talk about those things, and once they open up, they're happy to share everything. So I think it's good that they're willing to share it. They just need to find the avenue in which they feel comfortable to share it. And it's not always having a conversation. Sometimes it's smaller steps that they take to feel comfortable about opening up that conversation. And I think it's good because most of them are coming as themselves and speaking about it, rather than having a friend who comes up and says, this is what's happening with my friend, can you check in with them? And I think that's a big part of it, because sometimes when the friend's supporting the person who's struggling, the person who's struggling feels like, oh, I wanted to be the one who opened up about my story. This is my story. This is my journey. And so sometimes that can make it harder for the person who actually is struggling. So it's been good to see that when they do open up, they do open up and tell you pretty much everything that's going on and are willing to share that story.
And I guess this is where Hannah comes into, okay, then what happens, right? You share the story, and then what happens? As you saw with your friend, the system didn't really work at that time. So Hannah, what is your passion? What are you trying to do in your space there to change things up a little bit? What's your driver, I guess? In the space where someone speaks out that they're
right.
And you say, go see a counselor. Okay, I've ticked that. I've done that. I've done the tick boxes, but I'm still not feeling okay.
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. If people had answers, it'd probably be done.
But if you could, like, in the best case scenario, what would you like to see, I guess?
I would like a society that's way more accepting and way more nourishing, and that it would be awesome. Well, it's awesome that people are starting to have more support networks, but that's the pressure gets put on the support networks to be that final catch, and I think that's really unsustainable. I think, for the health system wise, there needs to be more. You can't just have counselors and therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists. There need to be even lower level people that are there to bridge that kind of
Yeah.
I suppose it's a huge step up to be going to a counselor, particularly for people our age and in this younger age bracket. It's a big step, and it's a big step for them. But I think there needs to be more support at that really baseline level, not just that upper level, because that upper level is just getting bowled over all the time. They just don't have the resources to help, and so all the people that really need it aren't getting the access that they need. I suppose resourcing and a greater understanding from society that this is a reality, and it's something that we all need to be addressing, not just some people with goodwill.
Yeah, you're right. And I think what you said there right there is understanding, because people don't talk about it in an inclusive way. It's more like, oh, that person has that. Oh, it's a negative affiliation. It's not an inclusive. Okay, cool. It's a bit like someone has diabetes. Cool, they got diabetes. Okay, cool. That's it. Okay, we don't exclude them. It is part of them. And I don't think that is part of the mental health conversation. If someone is going to oh no, let's tread carefully around them. Actually, they don't want that. They just want you to treat them as a normal person. But just
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's where we need to bring some more understanding, which is quite hard because, as you said, there's so much cultural context and there's so much happening in that space there that you need a magic wand to try and fix all that. But hey, you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere.
You do.
You got to start somewhere. I'm gonna flip back and talk about, so you're back your studies. So you flipped your switch. So you go, actually, wait a minute. And how did that change your life when you flipped the switch around your study? Did you start enjoying it then, or did you enjoy, I guess, in a different way?
I think it gave me the agency, and that I think it gave me the self permission to do things that actually I wanted to do. With law, a lot of it is prescriptive. You've got compulsory papers that you have to take, but outside of those papers, and I did this in high school. I took the papers that people said was going to be most beneficial to me in the long term, and I hated them.
Yeah.
No, I didn't want to take stats in year 13, but
Yeah.
I was told that was going to be the thing that was going to be best for me.
Yeah.
To go across the board, and actually it wasn't. I wanted to do calculus, and I didn't do it, and it's still something I wish I'd done, believe it or not. But it's the same thing that happened at uni. But once I kind of flipped that switch, I realized that actually I should be doing the papers that fire me up and give me really ignite that curiosity. And that's really what happened when I kind of made this mental challenge to myself, that I was going to use my degree to help build something outside of a legal career. And I started doing, I took law and Indigenous people, and I started taking a lot of Indigenous orientated and outskirt community orientated papers, both in my law degree and my BA. And it just made things, I became curious, and I really wanted to learn about it, because it was something so different to what I thought I could be doing. And it's changed a lot.
It's crazy. Once you flip the script, things just change totally. Hey, and it's awesome that you had that, because a lot of people that I speak to, they do exactly what you just said. I'm just doing this because in the long run it's going to be helpful. But what about right now? What about the stuff that you enjoy right now? The long run, life changes, right? So enjoy what you're doing right now, and find your passion, fire up. Yeah, and I guess that happened to you with you, Tanya, as well, because our initial conversation you had, you were like physiotherapy and and then you found the stuff that really drives you.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to find something that you enjoy, and I guess also just understanding that things do change. I think my issue was that I could see myself doing so many things in the long run, that if you spend all that time worrying about what you could do or what could be something good for you, you don't actually end up doing anything. It goes back to what we said in the last podcast. If you're doing everything, you're doing nothing. Yeah. I think I was spending too much time trying to figure out, oh, this would be a cool job. Oh, that could be a cool job. But I had to actually be realistic and be like, nah, actually, this is what I enjoy. Let's start with that and see where that leads me.
Yeah, and which is very true. I like that quote that I keep saying. If you do everything, you do nothing. It's something I tell everybody. It should be a T-shirt. But Hannah, I guess you also had the other experience of being a subordinate as well in a college. So you would have seen some interesting things happening there. Because you had a short stint at University College doing that. So what is that like for you, with the mental health hat going on and the mental health
Sure.
and well-being. Yeah.
Sure. I wasn't actually a sub warden. I was an assistant warden.
Sorry. Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
that's okay.
All these crazy titles.
I know there's so many of them.
Yeah.
So I went into that role for the second half of last year. So it was just a contract role to fill a gap. And it was eye-opening, to be honest. Like it was a really challenging time for me, not just the job, but in my personal life as well. And I think that just made everything feel so much more daunting. And yeah, it made me realize, my gosh, there's so much going on in our young, with young people, and particularly with COVID and the effects that COVID's had. We're just, there's so much that we could be doing, but where do you even start?
Yeah.
And at times it was entirely demoralizing, because I was like, I just don't even know what or where to start. I don't know who needs the most help or how I can provide them the help that they need, because I was new. People didn't trust me. I hadn't had that ability to create connections when I started. And then it just, I suppose, just developed into just doing what I could. And it was a hard learning process, actually, to realize that that's all I could do, because I wanted to do so much more. But I just had to do the little things, because the little things were the only things that I could be doing at that time.
Yeah, and it's really hard, because it's such a crazy environment. I think universities across the board are such crazy environments, because you have this influx of young people that come in, and in their first year across the board around the world, they're in this artificial space where you're meant to like everybody, and if you don't like people, it's just a crazy space. And then your second year, you have a different skill set going on, and as a staff member, when you're watching, you go, okay, cool, where does my roommate start? Where does a roommate stop? Where do I, because some things you go, and I'm sure both of you see this as well, you go, hey, this is not part of my job description, but as a human being, I know that this is not okay. What do I do here? Or how do I do this? Or where do I go? And, I appreciate both of you, would have gone through this. And it is quite easy to go, damn, I don't know what to do. I actually don't know what to do. But it's hard to say that, right? It's hard to say that in that space when you have a young person that is in front of you that is having a breakdown of some sort. Which goes back to what you're saying. There's so much happening there, but where do you start? You can't wait till it gets escalated, because then is it too late or not? Which is crazy. But flip side also, there's also positives in that role, that there's a lot of positives in that role.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you both find those. And I'm sure, and this is why Tane is doing what he's doing, because he's got to go to watch some futsal right now and stuff, and his stuff that you enjoy.
Yeah, you don't do it for the money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
None of us did it for the money, right? No.
No.
Yeah, if we talk off camera, I can tell you about my experiences as well. But yeah, so what are you doing now? So Hannah, what are you? So you still the mental health stuff is still part of your life, right? That's a very big part of your life. But you've got to pay the bills. So which is important.
Yeah, I've got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So when I was at uni, I was meant to go overseas for my last semester, and I was meant to go over to Mexico for an exchange, and then that got canned because of COVID. And I had this grand plan that I was going to be overseas and continue traveling. So I really had to pivot in the past 2 years about what I want to do. And right now I'm in terms of job wise, I have been trying a lot of different things, because there's no one thing that I can formulate in my head that is exactly what I want to do. And so my kind of strategy at the moment is putting my finger in a lot of pies and seeing what really tickles my fancy and what also doesn't. So working out what I do and don't like. So at the moment, until the end of start of July, I am operations manager for campus and collegiate life services. So really I'm ops manager for all of the first year colleges at Otago, which is a big jump and a very daunting one, to be honest. It's not, I didn't train in any of this. And I'm definitely learning on the job, and COVID's obviously made it a really, really tricky situation. But that is what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
But I like if we take out the job titles, I like what you said there, that you're actually trying out different things to find what you like and what you don't like, because and amongst all the stuff that you like, you've also got to think about the stuff that you don't like, and it's important. It's because it's your life, right? You're all leading your lives, and you go, hey, wait a minute, if I don't enjoy this, why should I do it? So
Exactly.
that's pretty cool. And what about and what about the stuff that you're really passionate about? So you're paying the bills with that. What about the stuff? Are you still engaging in that, and how are you engaging in that?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely am. I suppose I'm doing it a lot more colloquially rather than formally at the moment. I'm no longer a student, so I can only contribute to Silverline in particular ways. And more so from the back seat. I actually flat with Tash Cox, who's a program activator at Silverline and for the Social Impact Studio. So we have a lot of conversations, and that's kind of my way of still giving to the Silverline community and the Social Impact Studio community is through that. But actually, something else that is a new project that I've started is and it addresses mental health in a very different way, but it's still there because everything's interconnected. Is I had started along with a couple of other people, we are providing water safety and water familiarization lessons for migrant and refugee Muslim women.
Oh, wow.
So we're doing that once a week to a variety of women and their daughters to provide them just an ability to be somewhere else and do something completely different that they wouldn't usually have access to because of their cultural restrictions, and provide them a safe space to just lose that supervision and lose constraints, really. And already I can see how positively that's impacting their mental health and their well-being just by seeing them engage and interact with different community members as well. So it's a really good networking opportunity for them too.
Yes, that's pretty awesome. I like what you said, because when we think about mental health, we think we have to do these pretty awesome, massive things, but actually just those small things, everything contributes to mental health. Mental health is a spectrum, and what you're doing there sounds pretty amazing. But it's not just about the mental health; it's about, like you said, breaking those cultural constraints that I'm pretty sure a lot of refugee families have. And it's something that I see when I work with young people that come from refugee backgrounds, especially young females. They're constrained, and just giving them that space to just be in water and just be themselves with a trusting space is amazing. So well done, you and your crew. Yeah. And if you want to plug that and you want to get other people involved, you feel free to plug away. Because I think it's pretty important to do that. Tane, with your young people, do you see the same thing? Do you see? I think the other day there was so this last week was Sustainability Week and Giving Back Week and all that kind of stuff. There, did your young people get involved in that, or do they willingly go and do that?
Yep, we had quite a few students go out and help where they could. We had a few students go to the Castle Street cleanup yesterday, which was good to see. Without having to advertise it as well, it wasn't like, "Oh, come down" as a thing that we're doing as a college. It was just their conscious decision to go and do that, which I thought was that's more impactful than being like, "Hey, we're going to do it as a whole," because then it's more about, "Oh, we're doing it because everyone else is doing it." So I've gone out and gone, "Hey, this is something cool that I can get behind," and I thought that's where the power comes from, and it's the same as we start promoting like volunteering and other things that they can do, that the real power comes when they decide for themselves that, hey, I want to do this because this is something cool that I want to do.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we said in our last podcast. When you do stuff just because you want to, not because of any grades, not because someone's telling you to do it, just because you want to be a good human being, it just changes you so much. And it has more meaningful work when you actually do it, which is really powerful. Which is what I see with you, Hannah. I mean, I've always resonated with, I've always inspired by the way you stuff, because your stuff is not about you; it's about giving back. And sometimes you don't know what giving back actually looks like. Sometimes even just a small smile, just to say, hey, it just makes someone's day brighter, and give it back can happen in any way possible. And the fact that you go against the grind is really awesome as well. That's gonna be my quote: go against the grind. That's amazing. Um, yeah. So Hannah, what's if you could, so post July, what would you, what is your wish for the space for you? If you could have a wish, what would that be? I mean, you've mentioned it before, but is there something else that you wish for the space? Because obviously you're very passionate about it, and rightly so. Especially, I guess I'll put that into context as well. Especially with given that New Zealand has a really high suicide rates. You know, if I put that into context for you, because that's obviously where the stem from. What would you like to see happening in this space here?
I would love for there to be more grassroots stuff. You know, I think that, so starting at a really early level, you know, people don't have to be talking about all of the big stuff that's really difficult and really hard. You know, this is the movie Inside Out is such a good example and such a good educational tool. And I think something like that, or, you know, programs and education and curriculums like that can be put into schools and into kindergartens, and, you know, teaching people about normalizing speaking about your emotions, and then on top of that, creating those support networks institutionally. So I'm not a huge fan of the institution, but I think the institution can do better, and I have hope that there are people out there that will be a part of that, and creating those lower levels of support. You know, so the people that really need access to psychologists, psychiatrists, they can have that, and the people that need just someone to talk to, or someone to support them and provide them other opportunities to maintain or create a positive or well-balanced well-being, is there for them. And I think that comes from a really strong lower base, and that's education and those little support networks, or they're big support networks, but that would be what I would really hope for a space like this. But there's a lot of work to do in between now and then.
Yeah,
but you've got to
start somewhere, right? And I guess that's like any, if you're building a house, you got to build a foundation. And at the moment, we're building a ceiling without a foundation. That's what's happening, right? So it's gonna crumble. Yeah, I guess we've been speaking for just about an hour now, which is a great place for us to wind up the conversation. And Hannah, our podcast is called Passes of Knowledge, and every podcast we love our guests to leave the podcast with a piece of knowledge they'd like to share with our listeners. So on saying that people always get stumped by this.
I was going to say, you should give a brief about that.
Exactly, which is why we don't do it. Yeah, is there any one piece of knowledge that you would like to share? I mean, yeah, that you like our listeners to think about or reflect on or think or share?
Sure. I suppose that there's not one way of doing something, that you can come to the end result by doing something completely different, and the end result doesn't have to be what you thought it was in the first place. You know, one of the things that my mum always told me was dare to do things differently, and I suppose that's knowledge that I carry through in everything that I do. And you know, hearing that is sometimes quite liberating for people. So I hope that is.
Yeah, that's very powerful. You know, there's two things there. There's no one way, and dare to do things differently, because a lot of us do things just because someone else has done them that way there, and just because someone's done it doesn't mean it's the right way or the only way. That's a very, very powerful share. Thank you very much, Hannah, for that. Tane, any last words to round off this conversation with Hannah?
No, it's been great to just hear about your story, and it also makes me realize that I just need to be opening up with conversations. You know, I don't think we open up enough, and if I'm able to open up in the small ways first, that leads to bigger conversations and stops things from escalating to the point where serious help is needed. So I think it's just helped me reflect and remind myself that I need to, you know, talk to my friends, talk to my family, and see how they're doing, and actually see how they're really doing. You know, not the superficial "how are you? I'm good," but actually see what they're doing.
And there's your starfish for today, Hannah. Boom. Awesome. And on that note, we'll run off our podcast. Thank you, Hannah, for another fantastic podcast conversation. There's tons and tons of wisdom, tons and tons of knowledge there, tons and tons of experiences there, which I'm sure listeners will gain a lot from. I know I have gained a lot and I've learned a lot, and I know Tana has as well. So to our listeners out there, thank you very much for having us and listening to us again. And we'll say bye to Hannah. Bye, Hannah. And to our listeners, please please share, comment, pass it to your friends, your family. This podcast only lasts or goes on because you do what you do. Thank you very much. And the key learning, as always, is make sure you find something or some way to fill your basket of knowledge. Bye, everybody.